The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, thick and cream-colored, handed to me by a court officer who did not smile. "Are you Noel Carver?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "You've been served." That was it. No explanation. No apology. Just a practiced neutrality. As if my name had already been moved from the category of person to the category of case. I closed the door and stood in my kitchen, the envelope heavy in my hands. I did not open it right away. I already knew it would be something my parents believed was necessary, reasonable, and long overdue. When I finally tore it open, the words sat on the page like a quiet threat. Probate court, petition for limited conservatorship, filed by James Carver and Eleanor Carver, my parents. Before the shock could fully land, let me say this clearly, because it matters. The story in the video is a creative work by Revenge Amber. All characters and events are fictional, crafted to convey a humanistic message and the values of family. I read the petition once, then again, slower. They claimed I was impaired under stress, that I made financial decisions without long-term clarity, that my independence was not stability, but isolation reframed as choice. They cited a medical leave I took 3 years ago for anxiety. They called it a pattern. I sat down at the small kitchen table I had chosen precisely because it fit one person comfortably. The silence felt deliberate, almost accusatory. I called my mother first. She answered on the second ring. "Noel," she said, already prepared. "I was hoping you'd read it calmly." Calmly. I repeated, "You're asking a court to decide whether I'm allowed to manage my own life. We're asking the court to protect you," she said. "There's a difference. There's control," I said. "And then there's concern. You've always blurred the two." She sighed, the sound she used when I disappointed her without trying. "Your father and I talked about this for a long time. You didn't talk to me. You don't listen," she said. And there it was, the familiar shift, the quiet accusation that everything happening was the natural consequence of my refusal to comply. I hung up before she could say my father's name. I called him anyway. He didn't bother with greetings. "This doesn't have to be adversarial," he said. "If you cooperate, we can keep this limited. Limited to what I asked. My finances, my contracts, where I live." "You're being dramatic," he said. "You work with records. You know how this goes." That was the moment something inside me went still. "You taught me how this goes," I said. "You taught me that paperwork is power." He paused, just long enough for me to hear calculation replacing reassurance. "We're doing this because we love you," he said. "No." I said, "You're doing this because you don't trust a version of me you didn't design." He ended the call. I sat there for a long time after that. The petition spread open in front of me like a map someone else had drawn over my life. If they won, I would not just lose money. I would lose the right to say no. If you're still listening right now, stay with me. This is the part where silence usually wins. This is the part where people like me are expected to fold quietly and let the system speak for us. I didn't fold. I picked up the phone again and searched for a name I had saved years ago without knowing why. Courtney Hale. I didn't know it yet, but that call would change the balance of everything that followed. In the Carver family, nothing was ever said outright. Everything was implied, framed, or footnoted. Growing up, I learned early that tone mattered more than truth. Silence was approval. Questions were defiance. At dinner, my father used to glance at me over his glasses and say, "You could do more with your mind if you applied it correctly." My mother would smile. "Your father just worries you're limiting yourself." What they meant was always the same. I was acceptable only if I reflected them. My brother Philip never had this problem. Philip was decisive. Philip was impressive. Philip spoke in the same measured cadence as our father, using words like leverage and exposure before he was old enough to vote. When I moved out, Philip called me exactly once. "You don't have to make this so difficult," he said. "I'm not," I replied. "I'm just leaving." He laughed softly, like I had misunderstood the premise of the conversation. You'll be back. Everyone comes back once they realize how much support costs. That was the Carver way. Independence was tolerated only as a phase. Autonomy was considered a temporary misunderstanding. Years later, when I stopped attending family events, my mother framed it as concern. She's isolating. She told relatives, it's not healthy. When I declined help, my father reframed it as irresponsibility. She refuses guidance. He said, that's dangerous. They never asked what I wanted. They assessed what I failed to align with. After the petition arrived, Philip called again. This has gotten out of hand, he said, irritation slipping through his controlled voice. You didn't have to force them into this. I didn't force anything, I said. They went to court. They went because they're scared, he replied. And because you don't communicate. I communicate boundaries, I said. You ignore them. He exhaled sharply. You've always taken things personally. No, I said. You've always treated control like love. There was a pause, not reflection, calculation. You know how this looks, he said finally. A woman living alone. No partner. Minimal social footprint. They're trying to protect the family. I am the family, I said. Or did that change when I stopped agreeing? His voice cooled. This doesn't have to be ugly. It already is, I said. You just haven't been on the wrong side of it before. He ended the call without saying goodbye. That night, I reread the petition and noticed how carefully my life had been translated into liability. Every choice I made quietly was recast as absence. Every boundary was rewritten as instability. This was not concern. It was narrative control. And for the first time, I understood something with painful clarity. They weren't afraid I would fail. They were afraid I would succeed without them. I met Courtney Hale 2 days after the petition arrived in a small office that felt deliberately unremarkable. No awards on the wall, no framed headlines. Just a desk, 2 chairs, and a legal pad already filled with notes about my life. She didn't start with sympathy. Your parents filed this correctly. She said, that's the first problem. I sat straighter. Correctly how they didn't accuse you of being incapable. Courtney replied. They accused you of being questionable. That's much harder to disprove. She slid the petition back toward me and tapped a paragraph with her pen. Here. They cite your anxiety leave. It was 3 years ago, I said. I took 6 weeks. I went back to work. I've had no issues since. I believe you, she said calmly. The court doesn't need to. I felt something tighten in my chest. So this can actually work. Yes, she said. If they frame you as someone who functions only when conditions are ideal. I stared at the paper. Every sentence suddenly sounded different. Not false, just angled. They also mention my finances, I said, but I've never missed a payment. I've never asked them for money. Courtney nodded. They're not arguing mismanagement. They're arguing risk. A woman alone. No spouse. No visible safety net. I looked up. That's not evidence. It doesn't have to be, she said. It has to introduce doubt. Silence settled between us. Heavy and instructional. If the court grants even a limited conservatorship, Courtney continued, you lose the right to make independent financial decisions. You can't sign contracts. You can't refinance. You can't decide where your money goes without approval. And if I don't cooperate, I asked, they can escalate. She said, full control, forced evaluations, court-appointed oversight. My throat went dry. So my parents get to decide my life because they don't like how I live it. They get to try, Courtney said, and they're counting on you doing what you've always done, which is staying quiet, she replied, assuming the truth will speak for itself. I leaned back, the weight of that landing hard. My father taught me how courts work, I said slowly. He knows exactly how dangerous this is. Courtney's expression sharpened. That tells me something important. What? This isn't panic, she said. It's strategy. I closed my eyes for a moment, the image of my father's voice calm on the phone resurfacing. This doesn't have to be adversarial. It already is, I said again, this time to myself. Courtney flipped her legal pad closed. We're going to need to show the court who you actually are. And if that's not enough, I said. She met my gaze, unblinking. Then we show them why your parents need control more than you ever did. For the first time since the petition arrived, fear shifted into something sharper. Focus. Courtney did not ask me how I felt. She asked me what I had. Bank statements, I said, employment records, mortgage documents, tax returns. She nodded once. Good. We'll need all of it. And my parents? I asked, what do we need from them? She looked at me carefully. We don't ask them for anything. That sounds risky. It's deliberate, she said. People who file conservatorships expect transparency from the respondent and privacy for themselves. I folded my hands together to keep them steady. My father hates asymmetry. Good, Courtney said. We're going to use that. She explained the plan without drama, like someone describing a surgical procedure. We object immediately, she said, not emotionally, procedurally. Then we document your capacity in a way that leaves no room for interpretation. And if they bring in a doctor, I said, they mentioned an evaluation. They will, she replied. A friendly one. Someone who's never met you. My jaw tightened. That feels illegal. It's common, she said, which is not the same thing. I leaned forward. So what's the counter? We control the record, Courtney said. Every fact we submit will be verified. Audited, cross-checked. She paused, then added, and we prepare for the part they're not expecting. Which is, that you're not just competent, she said. You're disciplined. I exhaled slowly. They've spent my entire life saying I wasn't. That's why they filed, she replied. They assumed you'd try to defend yourself with explanations. What should I defend myself with? Evidence, she said, and silence. The word landed heavier than I expected. You mean I don't confront them? I said. You don't explain. She corrected. You don't justify. You don't negotiate. That's going to drive my mother insane. Courtney's mouth curved. Not quite a smile. Let it. I hesitated. If we lose. She cut me off. We're not thinking in those terms. That's not an answer. She met my eyes. If they win, you lose more than money. You lose authorship of your own life. The room felt smaller then. My father once told me. I said quietly, that paperwork decides who gets to speak. Courtney stood and reached for a folder. Then let's make sure the paperwork tells the right story. She slid the folder toward me. From now on, she said, you don't react. You document. You observe. And you let them underestimate you. I closed my hand over the folder. I had spent years shrinking to avoid conflict. This time, I would let the record speak louder than I ever had. Courtney asked me to bring everything, not highlights, not summaries. Everything. I laid it all out across her conference table in neat, labeled stacks. Bank statements going back a decade, retirement account reports, bond schedules, property records, appraisals, receipts for purchases most people would have dismissed as indulgent or impractical. She didn't comment at first. She just read. How long have you owned your condo outright? She asked finally. 3 years, I said. I paid it off early. She made a note. No co-signers. No, I said. I didn't tell them I was close. She nodded again. Of course you didn't. She moved on without judgment, flipping pages with controlled speed. This bond ladder, she said, tapping the page. You structured this yourself. Yes. Why so conservative? Because I wanted it to survive without supervision, I said, including theirs. That earned a brief glance up. Approval, maybe, or recognition. Then she reached the folder I had hesitated over the longest before handing to her. "What's this?" she asked. "My archive," I said. She opened it slowly. Letters, contracts, court filings from the early industrial period, handwritten notes in the margins, provenance documentation, insurance certificates. She stopped. "These are original." "Yes. And you've been acquiring them for how long?" "Since graduate school," I said. "I never bought anything I couldn't afford outright." She leaned back slightly. "You know what this is worth." "I know what it's insured for," I said. "I don't track market value." "That's a luxury," she replied. "And a discipline." She closed the folder carefully. "You never told your parents." "I never told anyone," I said. This wasn't about secrecy. It was about ownership. She studied me for a moment. "They assumed you were barely staying afloat. They always did. That assumption is going to cost them," she said. "But not yet." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "We don't lead with this," Courtney said. "We let them talk. That's dangerous. It's strategic," she replied. "People reveal more when they think they're winning." I thought of my father's voice on the phone. Calm, certain, already writing the ending. "You're going to catalog this," she continued. "Every item, independent valuation, third-party verification. And when they see it, they won't," she said. "Not until the record is read." The phrase settled between us, precise and ominous. "This wasn't a backup plan," she added. "This was a life you built quietly." I gathered the folders back into my bag. "They never saw it," I said. Courtney met my eyes. "They're about to—" Courtney called me late in the afternoon, her voice sharper than usual. "I need you to sit down," she said. "I am," I replied. "Good, because this explains everything." She didn't ease into it. "Your father's former firm is under review," she said. "An ethics inquiry tied to a case he supervised before retirement." My grip tightened on the phone. "He never mentioned that. He wouldn't," Courtney said. "It's not public yet, but it's real." She continued before I could speak. "There's more. Your brother Philip personally guaranteed a business loan last year. The venture failed. He's exposed." I closed my eyes. Philip had always sounded so certain, so insulated. "How exposed?" I asked. "Enough that your parents are backstopping him," she said. "Enough that liquidity matters." The word landed hard. "This isn't about my anxiety leave," I said. "No," Courtney replied. "That was the pretext. And the timing," I said slowly. "That's why now." "Yes," she said. "They're under pressure, and you are the one asset they don't control." The air felt thinner. "They're using the court as leverage," I said. "They're using the court as camouflage," she corrected. "Concern reads better than desperation." I thought of my mother's voice, calm, measured, already rehearsed. She told people I was isolating. I said that I wasn't letting them help. Courtney didn't hesitate. They weren't offering help. They were assessing access. A pause followed, heavier than silence. "If the conservatorship went through," I said, "they could redirect my accounts." "Yes." "Approve asset sales." "Yes." "And shield themselves from scrutiny." "Yes," she said again. "Especially if it's framed as fiduciary duty." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not fear, clarity. "They're not afraid I'll fail," I said. "They're afraid I won't need them." "They're afraid," Courtney said, "that you'll stay outside their reach while everything else collapses." I exhaled slowly. "Philip knows." "Of course he does," she said, "whether he admits it or not." "I don't want to destroy him," I said. Courtney's voice softened, but only slightly. "Then don't. Just don't save him." The line between mercy and self-erasure had never been clearer. "We stay the course," she added. "No confrontations, no warnings. They'll keep smiling, I said. They always do, Courtney replied, until the record speaks. I ended the call and sat very still. The petition wasn't an overreaction. It was a plan. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, which made everything feel closer. My parents sat at the table to the left, already composed, already prepared. My father's posture was immaculate. My mother's hands were folded as if she were attending a board meeting, not asking a judge to take control of her daughter's life. Courtney leaned toward me. Remember, she said quietly, you don't perform. You let them. The clerk called the case. My father stood first. Your Honor, he began, voice steady, familiar. This petition comes from a place of care. We are not here to punish our daughter. We are here because we fear for her. My mother nodded at precisely the right moments. She is intelligent, my father continued, but intelligence does not equal judgment. Noelle has always struggled under pressure. She withdraws. She isolates. She makes decisions without consultation. Courtney did not object. My mother was called next. I worry every day, she said softly. She won't let us help her. She shuts us out. She lives alone. She doesn't lean on anyone. She dabbed at her eyes. That's not strength. That's fear. I felt the familiar pull to defend myself. Courtney's hand rested on my wrist, steady and grounding. Then Philip stood. He avoided my eyes. My sister has always been private, he said. She doesn't see risk the way other people do. She believes preparation replaces connection. My father watched him with approval. She doesn't ask for help. Philip added, That's dangerous. Courtney rose slowly. Mr. Carver, she said, voice calm. How often do you speak to your sister? Philip hesitated. Not frequently. And when was the last time you reviewed her financial records? I haven't. So, your assessment of her risk tolerance is based on assumption, Courtney said, not evidence. Philip's jaw tightened. I know how she thinks. Courtney nodded. You know how she was allowed to think. The judge made a note. Courtney called Noelle's supervisor next, a woman who had reviewed my work for years. She handles sensitive records, the supervisor said. Material that requires precision and discretion. I would not trust that responsibility to someone unstable. My parents stared straight ahead. A financial compliance officer testified next. He spoke plainly. Ms. Carver has never missed an obligation, he said. Her accounts reflect long-term planning and restraint. My father shifted in his seat. Courtney turned to the judge. Your Honor, the petitioners describe isolation. What we see is autonomy. Then she called me. I stood, my legs steady despite everything. Describe your work, Courtney said. I maintain appellate records. I said, accuracy matters. Mistakes alter outcomes. And your finances. I live within my means. I said, I plan for longevity. I do not speculate. My father finally looked at me then, not with concern, with calculation. Have you ever been unable to manage your affairs? Courtney asked. No, I said. Have you ever required your parents to intervene financially? No. She let the silence settle. Courtney returned to her seat. The petitioners argue that Ms. Carver's independence is evidence of instability. We argue the opposite. My father stood abruptly. Your Honor, he said, my daughter is adept at appearing functional. That does not mean she understands exposure. Courtney didn't look at him. That is an assertion. Not a fact. The judge raised his hand. Counsel, he said to my father, you will have an opportunity to respond after the record is complete. My father sat back, displeased. Courtney leaned toward me again. They're uncomfortable, she whispered. Good. The clerk prepared the next set of documents. Courtney stood once more. Your Honor, she said, we ask that Ms. Carver's full inventory be entered into the record. My father's head lifted. What inventory? He said. Before he could stop himself, the judge looked up. "Proceed," he said to the clerk. The room shifted. Power does not always change hands loudly. Sometimes it changes when people realize they have been wrong about what they were holding. The clerk adjusted the microphone and began to read. "Primary residence," he said. "One condominium, owned outright. No liens, no co-owners." My father's pen stopped moving. The clerk continued. "Retirement accounts and bonds. Diversified and current. No withdrawals inconsistent with long-term planning." My mother's hands tightened together. Courtney did not look at me. She watched them. "Additional assets," the clerk said. Turning the page, a privately held archival collection consisting of early New England industrial legal documents, authenticated and insured. The judge looked up. "Insured for what amount?" The clerk checked the file. "A range between $620,000 and $780,000. Your Honor." The air changed. My father leaned forward. "That valuation is conservative," he said. Too quickly. The room went still. The judge raised his eyes slowly. "Mr. Carver," he said, "how would you know?" My father opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time that day, his composure fractured. Courtney spoke evenly. The petitioner reviewed portions of the collection prior to filing. My mother turned toward him, shock breaking through her practiced calm. "You went through her things," she said under her breath. The clerk continued, his voice steady despite the tension. "Additional financial instruments bring the total estimated net worth to approximately $1,450,000. My father sat back, his expression no longer controlled. It was focused now, assessing. The judge looked at him again. "You alleged financial mismanagement." "Yes," my father said carefully. "Potential mismanagement." "Based on what?" the judge asked. "Exactly." "On risk," he said. "On exposure." Courtney stood. "Your Honor, exposure implies recklessness. The record shows restraint." The judge nodded once. "It does." My father tried again. "We were not informed of these holdings." "That," Courtney said, "is not a legal requirement." The judge tapped the file with his pen. "Why was this inventory not disclosed by the petitioners?" My father hesitated. "We believed you believed," the judge interrupted, "that your daughter was incapable." Silence followed. The judge turned to me. "Ms. Carver," he said, "did you conceal assets from your parents?" "No," I said. "I maintained privacy." He studied me for a long moment. "Privacy is not incapacity," he said. My mother's voice broke. "We were trying to protect her." The judge did not look at her. "Protection does not involve seizing authority without evidence." He closed the file. "This court does not grant conservatorships based on discomfort with independence." Courtney exhaled quietly. The judge leaned back. "The petition is denied with prejudice. I am referring this filing for review due to concerns of bad faith." My father did not speak again. As the clerk announced the ruling, I felt something settle in me. Not triumph, not relief, ownership, not of assets, of myself. My parents did not speak to me after the ruling. They gathered their papers with the same careful precision they had brought into the room, as if dignity could still be preserved through posture. My father nodded once to the judge, already retreating behind habit. My mother hesitated, her mouth opening as if she might say my name. She didn't. Philip lingered near the door. "This didn't have to end like this," he said quietly. I looked at him, really looked. The confidence he wore so easily had thinned. "It didn't end," I said. It clarified. He swallowed. "They're in trouble." "I know." He waited. I did not move. That was the moment he understood I was not stepping in, not to fix, not to soften, not to absorb the consequences meant for someone else. "I hope you're okay," he said finally. "I am." I replied. Weeks later, Courtney called to tell me the referral was moving forward. She did not sound pleased or triumphant. She sounded resolved. You held your ground, she said. That matters. I thanked her and ended the call. The decision I made next surprised everyone except me. I contacted the New Hampshire Historical Trust and arranged a meeting. I brought a portion of my archive, not the most valuable pieces, the most representative ones. The archivist reviewed the documents carefully. This would be a meaningful contribution. She said, You're sure? Yes, I said. I want it preserved, not hidden. She smiled. You'd still retain ownership. I know. I signed the agreement with my own pen, my own name steady on the page. That night, alone in my kitchen, I placed the remaining files back into their cases. I did not feel smaller for what I gave away. I felt precise. If you've stayed with me this far, if this story feels uncomfortably familiar, take a moment after this ends. Sit with what it brought up. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to disappear quietly. They tried to decide who I was by taking control of what I owned. I decided who I was by choosing what I would release. And what I kept was the one thing they never had the right to claim.